Good evening. I think we'll call the Riverfront Improvement Commission meeting to order. Do I have an approval for the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
You have a temporary secretary?
It's going to be Steve today.
Okay. So it's due to-
Dave, can I ask a question about item in?
Sure, go ahead.
We haven't taken the roll on.
The,
Yeah, I know we have.
the item says
Discussion.
Lindsay Park Boat Club and it'll go to the city council
Whereabouts is it, Bill?
page.
Project?
It's in the minutes. See what I'm talking about?
The second paragraph under leases in the minutes?
Thank you.
Yes?
Leases, yes.
Yes.
The last sentence, did that happen?
It did. And it has been recorded, and I have supplied that recorded copy to Lindsay Park Boat Club, who has now supplied it to the SBA, so it's well on its way.
Did I ask all in favor? Aye. Okay. All right, there's the finance, the disbursements. Are there,
Second.
there's been a, Bill moved and Pat seconded the disbursements. Are there any questions? Nope. All those in favor? Aye. All right. The leases?
Okay, good evening. The first item is One River Place, and what you have in your packet is the existing agreement that we have, and it's the idea here is to go month to month with the likelihood that we will have a more complete, more permanent lease for your review at the next meeting. But this one in here is the existing rate and verbiage, all of the clauses are the same as the existing agreement, which concludes at the end of October. We need another month to finalize the new agreement.
So you just want to go month to month?
At this point,
Are there issues with releasing
it's just we're just trying to work out some of the details.
discussions? Thank you.
Bill, do you have a question?
No, I'm aware of what's going on and I know that Ms. Newell's been working with Steve and I actually told Molly to ask Steve to go month to month till the city can reach a good agreement to go forward. So I'd move approval of it.
Is there a
So we're
second?
gonna- Month to month.
Month to month.
Is there a second? Second? Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All right.
The next item, Nostalgia Farms Market. I let you know last month that they were closing. They have closed as of Sunday. There are two sort of parallel tracks that we're pursuing here. One is to work with them on a payment plan, a repayment plan, if you will. We will close. The existing lease concludes on Thursday, basically, at the end of October. And so we will, have access, and basically I'm planning to rekey the place on Friday in order to make sure that then we can work with them. And I've looked at the Secretary of State's website, and there is a lien from a loan company that would have first position currently on things. And so we will be reaching out to them in order to try to come to some sort of agreement with the contents and repayment for both of us, to be honest. That's one piece of this. The other piece is I think obviously all of us are interested in ensuring that we don't leave that vacant too long, and so I don't want the contents necessarily and what might have to happen to dictate that every month we would lose rent revenue from a potential new user, a new leasee. And so we have heard from a couple, including the Freight House Farmers Market, with some plans. I think with your consent, what I intend to do to make it fair would be to issue a request for proposals, an RFP, and to get about that very quickly. I couldn't do it any sooner because I wasn't sure that we wouldn't have had, or the Nostalgia Farms wouldn't have had a business that was interested in buying, the business. So I really couldn't jump ahead until, even today, it's a little soon. I mean, but I'm believing that with just a couple days left, we're fine to pursue an RFP. Would like to issue that through the city's purchasing division. We've done this before for available space, and then we would have a small group of commissioners that would review those proposals and try to decide on what is the most appropriate and the best deal for us, but certainly what's most appropriate for the market, for the freight house building as a whole, the complex. So those are two of the main two avenues that we're pursuing at this time.
Have you filed, excuse me, who is the lien holder? You say there's a lien on.
There is, the name escapes me right now, I apologize.
Have you filed lien on our behalf?
So I asked legal about that, and they said that we didn't need to because the lease contained the verbiage, the appropriate verbiage in there, but that it didn't necessarily make us first position. So we didn't need to. I asked specifically whether I needed to file a lien once I learned last week that there had been one filed from it's a loan company corporation. I forget the exact name.
What is the lien holder has filed a lien on what?
Well, when I
Obviously
looked
not the property, that's
right,
it's
so I
ours.
assume the contents.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking as well.
But there's not an amount, and I talked to Tom in legal about this because he said normally, unless they're doing something differently, that sheet that we're looking at on the website for the Secretary of State's office contains an amount, and we could not find anywhere an amount that they were putting the lien against. So we both were left scratching our heads about that.
So you will change locks. They've actually abandoned the site at this point. No,
They've
there's-
closed the doors, but there was some
Okay.
activity today. I'm monitoring it.
I appreciate that. Thank you. All right. Well, so we'll see what happens between now and Friday. But do we have any recourse if we observe equipment leaving the premises? Do you know if we have any recourse to prevent that? I mean,
I'm not sure before Friday.
call the police.
I'm not
the city
sure.
police.
I'm not sure before Friday.
Okay.
I mean, the lease is still intact, through October 31st. But they're also in arrears.
Right, but attachments are attachments.
Attachments, right? So that's at this point the plan of action to Friday first thing to do so.
Do you want to share the amount of the indebtedness?
Yeah, well, I don't know an exact amount because it's a base amount of rent and it's a percentage of gross sales. And because I haven't seen for several months the percentage of gross sales, that I'm basing my number. I'm going to provide you with an estimate based on the past, from a percentage of gross sales. But it's probably just north of $25,000, and that's utilities, rent, and taxes. That is about 10 months or so.
Kelly, you have a question?
Do you have a line of communication with the
Yes.
lessee? Are they responsive? Have they given you any kind of exit plan or?
I've asked for the exit plan. I would say we have an open dialogue going on. It's not, it's not combative, but at the same time, I haven't received the plan because I don't think there is one.
Okay.
So Steve, when you write this RFP, are you going to say this building's empty with nothing in it?
This suite,
Yes. Is that what you're gonna say, that it's empty?
Well, that's also difficult. I think I would err on the side of that, to be honest, so as not to promise what likely won't be. I envision that we're going to try to subsume some of the equipment if possible, but we may not.
And then if someone came forward with the market rate to absorb it between now and the time we have a proposal out and back, say the farmer's market, could we entertain that?
Yes. So the farmers market, some time ago, when they first learned of it, they've talked to you before about sort of expanding on both sides, but specifically with you all about the west end, kind of enclosing that loading dock stage area. When this became available, Lori right away, actually Ed had talked to Lori, and then Lori talked to me about possibly, they've got fantastic ideas, to be very honest with you, and it does seem an appropriate use. The reason we met tonight, and thank you for as we were going into the agenda setting for the meeting that we should have had a week ago today, there was a business that had reached out and was working with the existing tenant, and that would have been an assignment of of the existing lease, and it looked like that was going to happen. It fell apart over that weekend, and so, I guess technically if something else were to happen like that, where it was a business and they're ready to transact privately between the two and sell the business, they've got until the end of Thursday to do that, where then we could assign the lease. My guess is that that isn't the case. They don't have that, and that I'm preparing for changing locks on Friday and then dealing with what we need to, which I'm not quite sure, very honestly and bluntly to you all, how that's going to go. But we're going to try our best to make sure that we're right at the table. Now, whether that's, obviously we want what we're owed in cash form. Is there a way that some of the equipment could be valued and deducted or something like that? Possibly. But I don't even know if if there's enough value there in order to make us and the lien holder whole, I guess is what.
Oh, I certainly wouldn't even imagine that would be the case.
Right.
Are we ready to litigate?
There's a couple routes on that front. There's legal department to do that, or there's a collections operation that finance uses with the city. So, I mean, there could be we would probably have to pick one or the other of that.
Shifting gears just a minute, the suggested RFP, that's just a search for a tenant?
Yes.
You're not just going to let Thad do that, or let...
I don't have him on retainer or anything, and
Sure.
I honestly was hoping that there seems to be some interest. There's at least a
Sure, there's always
couple.
talk.
There's always talk. Let's do this so that then we don't say after you guys don't come under fire. I don't come under fire saying we didn't open up, no one knew. Well, let's put it out there like we normally would. Have a couple weeks for people to write proposals. Let us review them and see, what might be the best fit all around. I'm going to try to expedite it to the best. I'm going to try to expedite that process the best way I
Thank you,
can.
Steve.
In fact, the farmers market's already, they're getting ready November and December to have their indoor holiday. It's big months usually.
Right.
They come out they come inside from outside, and for November and December they could use space. And so I'm going to try to see what we can do even while we're dealing with all this, because there is a door that connects the two spaces, and so maybe I can accommodate them. There's a lot of balls in the air trying to figure some of this out, but all we're doing is peeling pieces away and trying to get a permanent lease holder. Yeah, it would only be that at this stage, of course. I don't have anything for you, and so we may do that, and then after the fact return. I will communicate those with you. I'm not sure how this is going to roll exactly.
Bill?
Yeah, so if I understand this, if the freight house does in fact become like a regular renter, or leasee or whatever,
The
they
suite
would pay the normal
market rate.
market rate.
We're looking for market rate.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, you're talking about if it was the
If
farmer's
they-
market.
Yeah, if the
yeah,
farmer's
market
market
rate.
ends up
Right.
wanting this space, and they would go through the normal process just like a regular.
I've communicated to those that have expressed even, just verbally some interest, whomever they may be. I've articulated the existing rent structure and sort of the market rate structure. So, yes, we're looking for market rate, and I think that I think the freight house can accommodate that. I think that we can get there.
Steve, we don't meet until the 26th. So my thought is, if it's okay with the commission, if the farmer's market even wants to rent it on a weekly basis, now through Thanksgiving, if they think that space is good and we don't have all that equipment there or some other issues, I think we should just let him do that, because whatever we can, if they can use the space, and whatever you can negotiate,
Right.
I think would be great. Otherwise, they would be paying at least for the utilities and the other things that need to be done
Right.
for the next few weeks.
Well, I think you need to stay at market rate because you have a responsibility to offer it to everyone at the same price.
Correct.
I don't think it's appropriate to cut an insider deal
Yep.
with the farmer's market, much as
I think
we
we're talking
might
about
feel that's something we'd like to do. I don't think that's appropriate to do.
we're talking about two different things, I think, aren't we? I mean,
I'm talking about if they want it for 2 weeks.
Oh,
You're talking about
Right.
if they want it.
Yeah.
No,
I just wanted to be clear because, yeah.
We're not here for another month, and really, lots of things could happen, and they could see that space as positive.
My plan is by the next meeting, and to have a plan. Well, I mean, the plan that you just heard is as good as it probably could be today. But my plan is for your next meeting on November 26th. If I can get through purchasing this issued soon, like tomorrow, give a couple weeks out on the street, we could identify a few of you who are interested in reviewing. I don't envision 20. I envision a handful, maybe 3, 4. Maybe more, I don't know. And then maybe for the November 26th meeting, we actually could be in a position, even though they might not be able to go into there because we may have to clear it. We may have to remove the contents in a storage area in order to be able to get someone in there on a permanent basis. You see what I mean? Because I don't want to go months with waiting for if it has to come to an auction or something like that. I don't want that to be over our head because every month now we're losing the possibility of rent. So I'm substantial rent. So, yeah. So that's my hope that by the November 26th we could actually have identified a new tenant, and that piece is done, because the other one's probably going to take a little bit more time. Any other questions?
I'm going to move on to projects. The first one here is talking about River West in terms of the street. I think if we're just in agreement, I don't think we.
Nothing permanent is happening, Carl. I'm not gonna. I will.
Yeah,
Certainly.
let us know. But I'm just thinking, if there is any interest, all it does is kind of helps our bottom line.
Yep. Okay, so under projects, strategic plan, River West in particular, we held this is just to go back when we had the joint meeting, I think it was August 27th. Many of you were at that joint meeting that when Mark Cornish with the Corps of Engineers presented. We had a follow-up meeting, I think Mr. Schertz and Dee, myself, several others relative to the Corps and the DNR were at this, I'll call it a stakeholders meeting, a mini one. And we basically went through the possibility of it's a competitive grant opportunity that would basically 100% pay for a feasibility study for this through the Corps, and they've basically submitted it, the paper, the white paper about it. And so we just went through that a little bit more, and they wanted a few other attachments, which picture-wise and stuff, which we provided subsequently. And we meet again, I think, on the 7th of November. We're coming back together. I don't think the decision on that grant opportunity is known until later this year, but we're going to continue to get together and you know, it's a strong, it might be, if it didn't get backed up, it might still be it's at least another month away, but certainly by year's end. And so we're going to continue and to visit, and you know, it just sort of strengthens the argument as we pull together and discuss more and more about the brilliance of trying to come up with some sort of plan for this harbor area. So. Is there something?
I think you have it. I think, you know, when we talked with them, they talked about what's feasible in terms of the slough and the bridge and the things that they can do, even looking at Black Hawk Creek and where the mouth comes into the river. So it would be that study, kind of the feasibility there, and 100% core funding. I can't imagine why we wouldn't want to be a stakeholder in that. And I think they just wanted, personally, what I got from it was they just wanted us to be stakeholders. That's what's been keeping it from being looked at and being seriously funded.
Many of their projects don't have a local stakeholder. I mean, if you can believe that, I mean, they aren't either able to identify one, or that stakeholder is not willing to be there. In this case, the city's interest. I mean, we haven't gotten into the details of the large-scale project here, but from a feasibility, we don't know them, but from a feasibility standpoint, when this grant opportunity is actually paying for the 100% of it, there's really no downside to this, to continue doing this and moving forward. So
They probably want the project more than we do.
possibly. There's a lot of interest in this.
It's a serious,
Equal.
I mean, from what they've talked about, it would enhance definitely the environment for fish, for fisheries. That's what they're concerned about. The whole idea of not having Asian carp being, you know, bred in the slough. Those are all very positive things. And I think they're interested in long-term what that slough is,
Black
how
Hawk Creek.
the wastewater treatment plant
Right.
is impacted,
Correct.
and also where Black Hawk Creek is. So these are all interests of theirs. in
There's
terms of
there's really a
navigation
plethora
and-
of reasons, regardless of the asphalt movement across the causeway itself. I mean, that's like but one piece of this
that's like
larger
minor.
contextual argument for.
You know, we've made
this
a
project.
peninsula out of what's
Right.
supposed to be an island, so we've made a huge mistake.
Well, one small example. I mean, we went up again, right? We 17.3, I think, here again in the fall. So this is 2 years in a row where we've had, you know, sort of flooding twice a year. You know, at 15, the causeway goes under, and therefore access to the lodge. Not that the lodge is rentable today, anyway. But the point is that you raise that, you allow access to the park for a longer period of time, and that has to be thought about as well.
I worked for the Corps for 15 years, and they get funded for environmental enhancement of the river, and they've got to show to the chief of engineers that they did something correct. And this, what we're talking about, is something that's very, very correct and very illustrative to the chief.
Okay. Shall I move on to item B, Union Station interior and exterior? Let me tell you that the interior, there were two bids. One for after we did the cleanup and the sort of removing the humidity from the air and cleaning it and all the sanitizing it, we went out to bid for the restoration of the interior. So now we're talking about some electrical and some drywall and some flooring and, you know, that kind of stuff, painting. That bid was awarded a cycle ago by the city council to Swanson Construction. The same firm was a lone bidder or respondent for the door replacement. And so Swanson Construction, that still needs to go through council, but that firm will be staging the work very soon. When I say the door replacement, there are 21 both interior and exterior doors, all of which are in various degrees of challenge. So not all of them need total replacement, but there's some work that some need as opposed to a warping and a total replacement for others. And so that work is going to begin very soon. I've made contact with the project manager for that on Swanson's side. They're finishing up. They need to order the supplies. They'll get down there and should be wrapped up by, I'm guessing, pretty close to year's end or so. That's all good because I'm coordinating with the Convention and Visitors Bureau, Visit Quad Cities, for hopefully some overlap that both can kind of begin as they do their build out, as they take over and come back to that space, that they don't have to wait, too long, but this is the time of year that they were hoping to end up in there anyway, so it's going to all kind of work out. And for certain, come spring when people are going to be back out and about, right, that space will be completed and ready to go to receive visitors. Now on an exterior side, I can bring this up on the Enterprise here as well, but there is you might recall that the plan for the cave-in in the parking lot where the HESCOs sat, I think I shared this last meeting, but the plan is before winter, although it's clearly sooner than what I was expecting, but Public Works is committed to basically patch an area to get us to spring, where then a replace and repair through FEMA reimbursement will take place. What you have in your packet is a design concept that we approved payment to Fur Graham, a design firm out of Cedar Rapids, last meeting. And this is the first initial look at a design for the exterior piece that could potentially, will be presented to FEMA as a possible flood mitigation project. If it's accepted, that it could be pretty exciting. That would then be something in the next couple of years, in all likelihood, hopefully before that. But it's sort of in a 3-stage program here. Initially, then repair and replace next year, next spring, and then this hopefully would get presented and accepted accordingly. And so it might be easier to actually look at this in your packet as opposed to even up on the screen. But
we have questions, then you have something to look at. And do you want to go through it a bit? So this would be the look as a final mitigation project. And what we asked them and what the city council paid for. So there's 2 contracts. The one that the city council paid for would underlie this, which would be the repair, right? And we wanted the repair, whatever they're going to repair, not to have to be removed
Redone.
for a mitigation project. That was the whole idea.
exactly.
So this also takes into account the railroad's 21-foot height of the tracks and the need for the road, both on Harrison and on Ripley, to go over. So the road narrows at the railroad track, my understanding. They're going to narrow the road at the railroad track from what I think is a 49-foot back curb to curb to a 36-foot roadway going over. They're going to do
36.
that on every railroad crossing. So there's going to be this trunk down piece so they don't have to spend as much money bringing everything over. So when you see that on your plate, it says 36 foot. This engineering firm is taking that as what is there. So as they see in the green, the build out of what seems like a berm, it's 3 to 4 foot. What it does is really brings that up to the height of the railroad tracks.
I took some
So did you?
pictures.
Oh, good. Yeah, that was a good idea.
So standing in various places on the brick on the south side, looking out, so you could get a sense, because on paper, even I was like, oh, you were going to be looking at a berm, and you're not, because of the way you still be able to see over it, because you can still stand there and see over the railroad tracks from that perspective. I was concerned that you'd be a visitor in the first floor of the visitor center and not be able to see the river, but you can. Right, it's no higher. It slopes from it. It slopes from it. So,
And the question there is, all right, now you're really only protecting this to 21.5, but
I'll just,
here's the other thing, flat on the top, a couple of sandbags get you a foot without a whole lot of work.
Sure.
So 21.5, 22.5, 23.5, so. Well, so going, 'cause I'm so excited about this project, by the way. So you want to go back. If you look at all the greenery, that would be the new berming area.
Those dotted lines are.
No, if you look at the dotted line going through the berming area, those would be where this permanent wall would be. Do you see the permanent wall? Through the berm. Do you see through the berm here?
Yes, I do.
That would
I
be
hear you saying permanent wall.
permanent wall dirt.
Permanent wall, okay.
No, that's probably gonna be something like a concrete, some kind of sheet, something.
built into it.
Built into it.
On top of the wall.
The dirt would be built this around it.
Inside.
So the goal, okay, so,
Invisible.
yes, invisible. So if you look to the west and you see the dotted line going towards Ethiopia, you would see that wall, and then it would have a gated area, kind of like similar to the stadium, but on a much smaller scale, where you could put in the aluminum panels gate. And then underneath this, what we asked them to do, because it's going to need to be replaced in a couple years, is to give that restaurant a real deck for like lots of people. So underneath of that would be a permanent wall going through the building.
So to
Then
clarify, on the south side, there's the existing deck on the Package Express building.
This would
This
wrap
shows
around it.
wrapped around to the west, and then you allow access from the north. Well,
Yeah.
it was brown originally, but yes. Right, and then building it in, it could be really cool, actually.
And it gives, I mean, no matter, I think we're at a point now where we would like to keep that maybe a restaurant. So like, that's a really investment in the future, I think.
And it
Probably
connects, more
won't get
important.
Litigation money as the deck, but.
More importantly, or just as importantly, it connects very nicely to the freight house on this end, and then similarly, on the east side, on the upstream side, that property connects in with the eventual build-out of Main Street Landing. And so they're very mindful through our discussions about making sure that these pedestrian connections are being made.
And you can see that, I think, from the freight house, and then we got this ramp access. We can do handicap parking there, and then bring everyone up through that ramp. At the same time,
What are you pointing at now, Dean?
well, show.
light-
Let's.
Parking for 8 persons?
Yeah, you see that, and then also, if you would enter the Ethiopia from Ripley Street now,
Ripley.
instead of from right at the back.
And is the purple brick?
It would be brick.
Surfaces are brick?
Yeah.
Are we retaining brick in those which are now brick?
Yeah.
Yep.
Now, they haven't received the subsoil testing yet. That has to still be considered. What is the subsoils there
Beneath.
in terms of what we can do. And then on the north side, those are temporary HESCOs that run the north over to the berm again. So that would be constructed
Yes, blue.
the blue.
What are the pink?
I think that's the temporary area that they're going to
short-
repair.
Short-term flood barriers. What are the short-term flood barriers?
Before you build a permanent, that's where you would put the HESCOs today.
Before this would
Once
get
they
built.
repair you gotta have something for spring.
The expectation is this is a couple years out at best. And so that would be, the pink represents the plan in the interim, which is not,
So until they can build
Yes.
this permanently, this would be next spring, for instance.
And that's why we want the,
This is the long-term one.
Yeah.
So that's 2 or 3 years from now, this is next spring.
And then the wall is embedded in here somewhere?
and that bluish.
well, this is the permanent. The building would be here, would be a permanent.
Yeah,
And then
sure, of course it
this would come like this to here. And in the interim, the HESCOs would go to the Ethiopian and,
The deck, basically.
yes. Now, this is the area that it failed. And, you know, that, my understanding, that's the area where they put the grease trap into the ground. So, I mean, we should have,
Just adjacent to that.
I just, yeah, you know, thinking about it, we probably, when that construction was happening, there should have been some dialogue with those who were putting up the HESCO to understand that that was, that's what happened.
That there was an area adjacent disturbed recently.
Just a couple of months before, which is the likelihood of that staying stable is rare. It's not going to happen.
Right.
Why do the temporary barriers not include the Ethiopian building? Is that, it's high enough that doesn't
correct.
flood?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so where we are now is to kind of look at that and say, okay, for Graham, we would like you to now tell us in detail what this means. And what it does in this plan is we will succumb to losing a drive and a roadway on the south side of the building. I think that's inevitable because of the railroad, frankly. They're going to give us literally nothing that we would be satisfied with to be able to drive a car. We also lose a number of parking places, but that too, I think, is because of the railroad. The advantage here is really that when we do the repair, Ethiopia and the freight house or the Union Station will receive a better walkway between the two buildings, and you can walk through there versus now it's kind of cars and bumpers.
Yeah, I mean, it will be a beautiful.
Right. On both ends, on the west side and the east side of the Union Station complex, are trees that are not the most beautiful. I'm not a strong advocate of ridding ourselves of trees sometimes, but these trees in particular are not helpful in any way, shape, or form, and so they're obstructive to view sheds and being able to even know that there's a Taste of Ethiopia restaurant right there. If you're over at the freight house, to be able to go visit, and similarly on the upstream side. And so the deck in particular, the wraparound concept is a strong idea, I think.
And the other thing is it brings in the pedestrian still having the ability from the north side of the building,
Right.
not to have to go up and down a hill,
Right.
to walk through the back on the
Right.
south of the building, which I think we still want a walkway. And this kind of lands it back out to both sides, going either to the freight house on one side or
I think
east.
two other points that we asked for Graham, and they followed up with this. We asked about if in engineering, if they've kind of taken a look from an engineering perspective, and they said that they have reviewed it from an engineering feasibility perspective and believe it is sound. They do not have the geotechnical report available yet, but they've been in contact with both HESCO and the railroad, and they don't have any indications from either entity at this point to believe that this is not feasible. And so the berms, walls, and pavement can be engineered to be stable as long as the ground under them is stable, and that's kind of what they're reviewing at this point. And then we've asked about a estimated cost at this point, and they're going to get back to us on that. They don't have that available at this juncture.
They need more time.
Yep.
I mean, this is kind of helpful. So, Bill?
Dee, do you know what the width of the right-of-way of the railroad is down there?
35, Zach.
35?
So part of their work is to work with the railroad so the railroad can accept this plan in terms of where this berm would be. And then the idea is to package that portion of it together so at a time there is mitigation funds available that FEMA will look at it. And also to have the concept as we do this, I want to say temporary, but repair of the area now.
Right.
So they see both of it in the cost differentials and see if there's anything there that they're willing to do.
Anything else?
Well, first of all, I think it looks very good. I think present tenants or future tenants would be glad to know that there is a plan in place to protect them from floods, whether they're in the Union Station or the Ethiopian present restaurant. I think that's a very positive thing, and I think it's got a lot of positives to this plan. My question is, I see 2 sump pits. Would those have pumps?
Well,
So-
yes, when it rains, the water's it's gonna collect behind the barriers, and it's gonna have to be pumped over, because we basically have now just made a square box. So that's what they're for, is to actually keep it pretty much dry on the inside as best we can. You know, I would think that you would still put the metal plates on the doors and those kinds of things, because you know you have 3 or 4 inches of rain. You don't want it to come back in your doors, but it does allow you to keep the building dry. And I
Yeah,
think the cost
the
that we're spending this year, that cannot happen again.
The important distinction, or something I want to make sure you know, I mean, it will still surround by water. We're trying to protect the building assets, you know, and so tenants will still, much like before, or just as before, will have to evacuate for some time. Rent will be abated, but hopefully we keep it dry and they can move in as soon as the water goes back down. But it will be surrounded, because that's the nature of how the water goes at certain levels in that area. Correct. That's the goal. Correct.
Yes, as you said, Madam Chair, it should never happen again. But, you know, that old saw of plan the work and then work the plan, I just don't have the impression that that's what took place this year. And reading the Corps of Engineers report that basically said should have followed the directions on the HESCO barriers, and to put it in a single sentence, was a pretty damning remark with respect to people who were responsible for installing and maintaining the flood protection that Davenport deserves. So I just can't get over my own personal feeling of disappointment about what took place here this spring, and I'll just leave that.
Well, I think Carl, I'm more acutely aware, and I know Steve is, and I think one of the things as we go forward, even when we get ready, and we know that we have this HESCO barrier new temporary wall, is I think there's a sit down with who's going to be involved with it being put up, who's going to monitor it besides Public Works, who's going to call it quits if they're going to call it quits, because you know that I think that there was no consultation with Steve, and there was no discussion with any of us, and to leave that building without those metal plates in the door was wrong, and we're living with the consequences with that. But also at the same time, I think we're at a point where HESCOs are not enough, and we need to have I think a larger permanent solution. So when we do have to do flood protection, we're not using a lot of people time, and we can be flexible with who's doing that then, maybe.
I certainly agree with Madam Chair's take on that, and appreciate the comment that you've made, and certainly support that fully. I just don't think those folks who were responsible for the failure of the plan that was in place and the materials that were in place to execute the plan have been held accountable for it. And I'm just making mention of it here now publicly, because I think that's still out there, that individuals employed by the city and responsible for this catastrophe have not been held to account for it. Again, I'll leave it there.
So I think this plan looks great. What is sort of the timing of, what process does it have to go through to be, to the extent that it needs to be adopted, or, you know, who does that, and what is the process
Well,
for it?
it's my view that today, since it's hot off the press, it's a preliminary look, and that we wanted you all who funded it to see it. But I think it obviously is, there's still some refinements, ongoing refinements, some feedback to provide, that sort of thing. And then I think that you all would approve it. But I also envision an upcoming joint.
Yeah,
um,
we're going to
council-
get to that
We
now.
are, but I envision it being a subject of that.
Public hearing at some point?
Well,
It'd be a
think-
joint meeting between
City council
city
and-
council and the commission,
I
and
think-
this would be one of those items to talk about, certainly.
When we get to the staff report, Steve and I have talked, I think we have now maybe 3 or 4 items that it's time to talk with the city council. And this, to me, is a major one, that they know what we're doing. They know they funded the repair work. And so, and they know that we are looking at a mitigation project. And it would be great for them to endorse it too, because,
Well, I think FEMA's going to require that, so.
and yeah, and I don't know if it'll be done by then, but we will bring it back to them as soon
Yep.
as it is.
Absolutely.
So they have a heads up.
One of the things I like about this is I think this is the perfect type of project that sort of is an example of what we talked about in the relationship between City Council and
Yes.
Riverfront Improvement Commission.
That's exactly right.
And what each of us should be doing and how something like this gets completed. So I really like it.
Okay. So the next item is an update on the railroad crossings, and I was unable to attend the meeting that was held just yesterday, so I'm going to beg your indulgence for
All right.
those that did attend to
I
provide
think
the
I'm going to
update.
let Kelly summarize it. I did maybe too much talking at the meeting.
Well, we are really trying to get to the point where we can tell the railroad proceed to 30% drawings on all of these crossings, so we can, I think, marshal this forward. We've had a lot of conversation about, what intersections we keep open, what doesn't stay open, how do we make it look as good as it can look, and all of those kinds of things. I think, so right now, I think they're going back, and Bill, you can correct me too here as I try, and I wish I had brought my notes from yesterday's meeting. But I think we're at the point where, other than really insisting on the bike path being at the same height as the railroad all the way across. Right now, their drawings really show some areas that are, kind of like you go over a cliff. And for our purposes, the bike trail has got to be something that families can ride. And it needs to be left in a way that it's not a frightening path to ride, which right now, honestly, I've ridden it, and it's not, I wouldn't take my kids on it. With the up and down that it's got, and how steep the grade is. So their proposal on that was still not sufficient. So that, I think, is one of the strong things going back, saying we really have to have that. In terms of crossings that will no longer be vehicular crossings, I wish I had my notes. So we're down to Ripley, Harrison, Perry, Gaines.
Marquette?
Is that everything that will have full vehicular crossing?
Marquette.
Marquette, yeah, yeah. What we're losing is Perry will no longer be a crossing that you would utilize, and Brady Street no longer a crossing.
I don't think we're there yet. As in, Brady Street is going to end, a car isn't going over it to be able to hook up to any street network. But I think from my perspective, if we think that we're going to put commercial development at the end of the Sky Bridge, you're going to have fire trucks and vehicular traffic at that through
Well,
Brady.
And my understanding is it will have the ability to have access for emergency vehicles and such
vehicles.
to
But
get
it's not
to
going
get
the
through there.
street's going to end.
But the street will end. Yeah,
And
I
it
think
ends
that's
now. It actually ends now.
railroad tracks?
It's,
To Beiderbecke Drive? I mean, just as it does presently?
Zach probably has this
No.
all
Yeah,
memorized,
Yeah, I'm on Harrison
so,
Street.
you're on Harrison.
Hi.
Yeah, never mind.
So
Thank you.
Brady's.
Wait, he's on Harrison.
Yeah, I was in attendance at the meeting yesterday just to clarify some points related to that. So the crossing schedule and that kind of thing, some points related to the
You
CP
don't have
rail.
graphics, do you?
Not that I could bring up
No, I
in
wish
quick
I-
order,
wish I-
as we knew from the meeting yesterday. But if we just go down the laundry list of crossings that were Gain Street, the plan itself did not show adequate accessibility to get down, back down to where the accessible spaces are. It assumed that the current sidewalk would just go to a point of egress onto Gain Street without, and that's just going to promote cut through.
That's not
People are going to just hike up a hillside.
They got to work on it, right?
Yeah, so that
I mean,
was-
we rejected.
That was communicated today.
And it doesn't cross because you're gonna cross it in the western now?
No, it
No.
goes, the
Gain-
plan
Gain
does
stays
have
open. We won't do western.
vehicular traffic, but they have really designed nothing for a person to get out of a car and get on a sidewalk and get to the ballpark. That's
Yeah.
sufficient.
So another concern that was brought up was how do delivery trucks and people drop off at the stadium with the elimination of Gain Street, because the drive aisle is going to drop back down away from the current alignment of Gain Street. So it has been communicated to CP Rail that this mitigating circumstance would require them to ensure that it can be used as the lower part of Gain Street can be used as a sufficient drop off. That wasn't included in the discussion yesterday. Moving on to Ripley.
Yeah, Ripley's.
Yes, no real substantial changes other than what was mentioned with the Union Station. Harrison's kind of the same way. Brady Street, in terms of accessibility, vehicular crossings can be made, and that's part of the discussion. I know that was a point during the meeting yesterday, but the overall intent is that will be utilized in some way for at least emergency circumstance. Perry, communication was made of a potential to discuss, not leave out, but negotiate future pedestrian crossing at that location. I don't know what's going to come about that one, but the communication was relayed that based on discussion taking place yesterday to maybe move forward with a closing. We had one time talked about closing the Cary Street extension in exchange for pedestrian crossing, but to not shut the door on it, I guess, is if that's still possible to negotiate. So,
I
as
didn't know
mentioned,
that we ended with that. So is that the communication that went back?
it was relayed by staff, so that the final cut still needs to go out, but those were made. And then the Pershing crossing obviously would be the switch out. So more or less, it's not great, but pursuing that one as well as River Heritage Park. The right in, right out, more or less, for lack of a better term, off ramp to get up to that grade was also advanced further. So that's what we're looking at.
Bill, you have a question?
Yeah, what about, Zach, what about the,
Maine.
Oh, sorry, I didn't talk about Maine. So that's going to be with the understanding that the material that's being displaced is being replaced as that same material, so brick for brick. Keep that in mind. A smooth transition to get up to the top, which we have yet to see the outcome, but it's progressing to a 30% level. Yes. Correct. That pedestrian crossing will be maintained at Maine.
So one of the other things that is maybe important, sorry,
I was going to let Pat ask a question.
no, go ahead.
Okay.
is just one, Dee brought up yesterday, and I think that there's good consensus on the fact that in a fairly short amount of time, we need to have an opportunity for the public to sort of get the information on this is what is being proposed. I think the 30% drawings will allow people to be able to see and sort of conceptualize what the proposal is, so that before it goes beyond that, the businesses down there and just the general public has had a chance to at least be aware of what the proposal is and how it would all fit together. So,
I was gonna ask you if any of the material is on the city website that it might be accessible at this time. Is
I
it?
think that's what Pat, your question
Forgive me.
is. What?
I got a couple of questions, but first was, Kelly, you kept asking, we've asked the last couple of meetings, I missed Mondays, about cost analysis and what it's cost to say. Have we come up with something? Is there anything put down on paper what the harm has been?
Oh, in terms of,
It's not
A
been-
dollar amount of what the
It's-
harm is?
It's not been communicated to the commission or the city council in that meeting, so I can't answer that question.
I wouldn't be able to answer that either.
Do we need that
Well,
eventually?
I think where we are now is we'll meet as that subgroup one more time to get to hopefully some 30% drawings that could then be talked with the city council and the commission outside of the meeting that we'd like to have with our mitigation and other issues, that would be just one meeting. Maybe the public would be there and they could ask questions too, but some forum where the commission and the city council is together to kind of review where we are and give each other feedback, I think is kind of where we're headed. There's unfortunately, there's going to be some decisions made that you won't be able to go back on, and it's changing. It's going to change what has been planned for years. It's going to change your access places, and it's also going to determine if there will be any at all commercial development, I think, potential at the end of the Sky Bridge. I think that is, these are things that is going to be an issue. In other locations, it's going to be issues as if this doesn't serve the stadium as well. It doesn't serve River Edge as well. There's going to be some issues there. From that, I'm hoping the staff realizes you probably then could assess what we got damaged. And then it will be a conversation, unfortunately, with the city council on what that means to them financially and what it means to them, financially in terms of are they going to make up the difference or are they going to ask the railroad to make us whole? So with that, I think, Bill, you have your
I agree with what you just said. What bothers me, and looking at it, is the cost. We can assess a lot of that cost to the railroad, but what we're really looking at to make it acceptable is actually probably considered a betterment to the railroad. And I think the end result here, we got to get an agreement that's just amicable to both people, but it's got to be a doable agreement. And I think we're probably going to run into trouble because some of the plans that are there, if I was in the railroad, I'd say you're getting a betterment. You're actually doing something that's better. And there's gonna be disagreements. So there has to be enough cost analysis here to know that what is actually required and what are the things that we as a city would like to see developed with it. And at some point, the city council is going to have to agree to, so it's something that's likable for everybody. They're going to have to contribute towards it. And I think there's going to be a problem when we get to that point.
As far as betterments, I mean, Bill, some of the betterments be a trade-off with some things that are harm that can't be repaired.
We're not going to, obviously, we're not going to look at it as a betterment, but when you go where the railroad had it, let's just say they have a derailment, okay, and there's damage. I go out there and assess the damage that's there, but the landowner, he wants a lot of other things, and you've got to reach an agreement. You got to get something that's doable by both parties, and I'm afraid that as we I don't disagree with what we're doing. I just think when we get down to trying to settle the dollar signs to do it, it's going to be a real problem. And we got to have to recognize that some of the intersections, sure, they're nice on paper, but it's going to take landscaping and other things to do, and that's when to make it acceptable. And that cost is probably going to come from the city. I just think we got to recognize that.
I think what we also have to recognize is in most of these intersections, these are interim steps because we really we really have plans on changing the entire look of the riverfront and at many of these intersections. Not, however, at Gaines. So that one's going to be a very difficult one, I think, to decide. Okay, you've done enough. Now we still can't live with some of these issues.
That's what I'm saying. You take Marquette would be an example right now. You can go down and cross Marquette Street, and but is that acceptable to us? It's acceptable to the railroad. They satisfied the law. They put the crossing back into service, but that certainly is not what we envision to be the final solution. There has to be landscaping and everything else. And I think we're going to reach an impasse with the railroad. It's going to be hard to work through.
Another item that, to follow that point, that hasn't been discussed in depth is our ultimate goal of being a quiet zone on the riverfront, and a quiet zone, so we don't have the trains just go through, but that requires a certain upgrade of intersections above and beyond what's currently shown. So from a staff perspective, we're trying to ensure that we're trying to hit that goal, that the subject has been brought up moving forward to where we're not stuck 5 years down the line re-upgrading things to ensure that, oh, we want to do a quiet zone now, okay, let's start over. Yeah, so see if there's economy of scale getting it done now. But that's negotiations of it's a separated medium, so where it discourages people from driving around the cross gates. Yeah, cross gates that swing down are the primary features, but with that, the added cost. And pedestrian separated from that another 10, 15 feet off the back of curb. So from what I understand, the railroad, CP Rail cannot specifically say we endorse a quiet zone. We have to get a consultant in the mix to verify that it meets quiet zone standards. So the railroad kind of has to work around that. They can't directly make that decision. We have to find a consultant that will say, yes, it meets these requirements, if that makes sense. Okay.
Is there state funding for quiet zones?
That I don't know.
Yeah, I think there is.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. So a few items of note from a meeting, the upcoming meetings for November and December. I just want to clarify, both will be held at the PD, just because December meeting, this is going through an upgrade, these chambers. So we're at PD for there, and the 26th council has moved their meeting in here at the very same time. So Tuesday, November 26th, it'll be over at the community room like we used to meet. We won't be. And then December, I had mentioned to you all the 19th, which is a Thursday, but I only did so because council was in here, on the 17th, but keeping with our Tuesday, even though it's not the fourth Tuesday, I would propose to meet on the 17th of December instead of the 19th. I wanted to get that to you far enough in advance to let me know if that wouldn't work for a quorum. So the next meeting's Tuesday, November 26th. After that, December 17th, Tuesday, both are at PD, and you have the 2020 schedule included in your packet for all of the meetings for next year. Secondly, speaking about scheduling, and we've already, I think the chairman alluded to a city council Riverfront Improvement Commission joint meeting. One has not been scheduled, but it is my strong desire to try to get one scheduled prior to the end of the year. And so I think that to that end, we've got a few weeks to make that happen. But I think there's enough to comprise an agenda that would be worthwhile.
Yeah, I think actually when we talked at the meeting, I think there'll be two. There'll be one just with the railroad crossings. And then I thought we did do some work at the beginning of the year on RFPs and processes, and I think
Right.
what we have done
Bring that
should go to the city council
Right.
at this point.
We almost
and-
need to revisit that with the work group in order to make sure we're ready to.
Yeah, we might have
present.
to. But my other thought is that it would be nice to have that done so people who work in the city kind of know those processes too, besides just
Yep.
the committee or the commission here. So I think that would be good. I think it would be time to talk to them not only about this mitigation project, but the key CIPs that we're interested in. It would be an opportunity to talk to them about those, especially the Planning West that we're
Yep.
interested in doing.
Yep.
And see if we can get their buy-in. That's a low dollar amount.
Absolutely. Third, the Freight House deck, the exciting project, came in quite a bit over budget. But it's going to be done. We've worked, Clay in particular, who's the CIP manager, has found another $150,000+. And I think there were about 6 respondents, so it was fairly competitive. I can't announce to whom it goes to because that will go to council here pretty quick. But the goal is to get that awarded. Might be able to stage some pieces of it prior to winter, like the upper deck part potentially, but coming right out of winter in the spring and certainly prior to the busy, month of May and that sort of thing, we would have it all finished. So that finding some extra dollars within the CIP for this current year allowed us to not only accept the base bid, but a few of the ad alternates. The only thing that had to be removed from it is the west end ramp that we talked about. But we are submitting a separate CIP item for the new fiscal year, fiscal year 21. So honestly, you're talking about a couple months delayed if it would get funded, because July 1, those dollars would be available. So I think we're going to be basically right where we want to be, and except it was a little higher than we had envisioned.
A
But
little higher. You said 150,000
yeah,
more?
well, I mean,
Uh,
I'm
can-
being in these things, yes. I mean, it is what it is. It came in over budget, but
Well,
an
you're
estimate's
getting
only.
millions of
I mean,
dollars.
an estimate is what's that?
He wanted to know how you find 150. They have this is all projects throughout the city.
Yeah,
that
these
they're
are
looking at. But-
massive amounts of
so-
CIP projects where
so what
there's
was our
balances
original,
available,
what
and
was
he's
our original
secured some of
estimate?
these balances and used them to
Yeah.
put into this one.
What was our original estimate on the project?
It was 190,000.
So our original estimate was 190, and it took another 150 plus.
So I
So
would
it's
say
almost-
the
almost double
original.
our original.
I would say the original estimate was a staff estimate, and when we had an architect refine and write the specs, that estimate basically was the range was right where it picked up from 190 and went all the way to 425. And so actually, when you
All right. So
look
when you
at a
went out,
professional.
you knew you were not at 190 because you already had whoever drew those plans and specs had. That's what had me a little bit nervous.
It fell right within the
So
outside.
the city staff knew that most likely they were going to have to find additional dollars.
Never know until
as
you
well.
bid,
That's
but
gonna
yes.
happen.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep.
And so you said it went through a competitive bid process.
Yeah,
So you had
of course.
multiple bids that were all in those ranges.
Yes,
Okay.
that's
Thank you.
exactly right. Yep. It is a composite. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, yep. Yep. So a very long life. The other issue, this is pretty exciting, you've probably heard in the news, but not only are you aware that we're having the Chris Kindle Market again, this is on the programming front, but the same weekend, the same Saturday, December 7th, the CP holiday train is coming through. And that is logistically, I'm working with the various people to make that a spectacular night. I think we're going to have, it's pretty cool. The holiday train has been, the last couple of years, has come through during an afternoon. It just isn't the same to see an illuminated train during daylight hours, but I think with the Chris Kindle Market going on and in the whole area of the Freight House and the Keene parking lot with the holiday train to cap the night off is going to be pretty cool. So we're making some logistical arrangements to make sure that is a seamless, fun, free family event.
Yeah, that'll be interesting since you can't go over Ripley Street.
Yeah, it's all the way the trains come through. It flips down from the north, so there's nothing really on the other side. I mean, it's illuminated, but the staging of all of it when it stops is on the north, like it faces out.
Okay.
But anyway, yeah. So yeah, it is. Yeah. Yeah. We are requesting them to build a ramp because there are, it's difficult to get people. So there's a couple, like the mayor and some people who need to get up onto the train, right? I mean, and so, no, I'm not anywhere along there. And so, the request had come from Churches United, who's the affiliate with the local charity for the train, the holiday train, about how do we get access to go on there, to do the check presentation, all of that. And I said, well, I'd contact Canadian Pacific to see how they can help you get a ramp to get up there. And then secondly, you probably have, if you've gone by the Freight House, you've seen the murals are completed. I sent you a note inviting you to an unveiling tomorrow at 4:00. We'll have the mayor and representatives from Quad City Arts and the program that we used. They turned out beautiful and really kind of complete that area with the murals. So if you're able to, it'll be a very brief ceremony along the north side at 4:00 tomorrow. Yeah. I think that's all I have at this point. Thank you.
Michael, do you have anything you want to share tonight? Or okay, excellent.
How boring it would be if the river wasn't flooded 12 months a year. All right. My information's a week old. I've got nothing new, but no floodwaters reached the lodge this time. So that's great since they just got that all cleaned up. The causeway, I was not down there this week. I inquired or didn't see or get any information, but I saw on Facebook tonight they're reworking on it. So I think you can just plan on the causeway being gravel for the near future. There's no other choice in that. It's no fun when you're a bicyclist, but at least people can get there. So it looks like that's where that's going to be. Marquette Street Dog Park, they're making quite a few improvements. I've never been on there with a dog. Evidently, there were even dog injuries because of the surface. The surface is so deteriorated. So they're working, getting that all squared away also. There's an enhancement scheduled for it in 2020, so I don't know any budget or anything like that, but that's coming. Evidently, that dog park is very popular. I biked by there a few times, and it seems like it's really busy. They're working also to put in artificial turf in some of the real turf areas where they really struggle keeping that up with the amount of traffic, the amount of foot traffic and everything that's going on. So I'm sure that will be presented in the coming months and be interesting. Centennial Park, the playground took a beating too in the floods. So that's the surfaces, the different types of surfaces are being worked on, probably not through the winter, but into the spring. LeClaire Bandshell, the seats evidently out there were due for replacement next spring, and they made the decision to not replace them, to take them out, and I think that's probably pretty good. People can bring their own chairs and sit how they want. So instead of spending all the money replacing those and doing everything, my understanding is it'll be used on the band shell, the maintenance and that type of thing. So
There will not be seating,
my
permanent
understanding
seating
from,
at the band shell
it
going
says
forward? Is
after
that your-
several meetings, the staff decided it's best if all seating would be removed and the funds reallocated to painting the band shell and purchasing a limited number of benches to be installed on the east section. So that's my understanding at this point.
This, I don't think it's been fully, like, I appreciate that. I don't think it's been fully discussed with the
It might
commission
not.
or council at this point. There's some ideas floating is all.
Are there? Okay.
right.
That's what
So don't.
I've got.
Okay,
Appreciate
we
your-
appreciate
We
it.
appreciate being advised. Thank you.
I can see either way, spending money over and over again, or people bring their own chairs, so.
But
Again,
there's a positive side to having permanent
Yeah.
seating there.
yeah, so that's all I have at this point. So, thank you.
Public with business and for the commission? Bill?
If I could ask you for maybe 2 minutes to talk about perhaps this issue, about the overage on your bids for the Freight House decking replacement. Maybe I'll start with that, because Steve Aarons was kind enough to give me the drawings for that, and I had a chance to review them, and it answered some of my questions positively. The west end of the decking, the ramp, I think, was a good one. The way that they've ended up with it, I think it relieves congestion that we currently have there. And I certainly would feel that would be one of the last things you'd want to cut, because that's one of the first things that I think that we're currently not served very well with. The decking surface itself, it's wood. It isn't. I don't know. I've been out there. It doesn't look so bad to me. And but anyway, the issue that I think might it's an opportunity, I think, that might save the city some money. What the drawings actually showed me the guardrail that they currently have running the entire length of the Freight House. They're at the guardrail height, which is 3'6" high, and they have all these expensive but necessary cables. It's a good look, and I've got to say they've done a nice job on it. But you're not required to have a guardrail there, because a guardrail is only required when you have a 30-inch change in elevation at that one point. Obviously, there might be reason to have some kind of a rail. You don't want kids, right now it's only maybe 1.5 feet tops. You don't want little kids going over the side, and it kind of provides an enclosure for the space.
Bill, they
and what-
serve alcohol on the deck.
I got it.
And the state law requires you to have some sort of fencing. So that's how we get our fencing.
Is that why it had to be 3'6"?
Yeah, yes.
Is that true?
You can't serve alcohol outside without enclosures now. We have some openings that are open, but yeah, there's a state law on
Okay.
you can serve alcohol.
Okay. Well, I'm just saying, if it were not required to have it at guardrail height, you could have it at tabletop height, which would be about 2'8". You'd be able to save 1'10" times the whole length. Maybe enough money to help get that. And just an aesthetic thing. I know it's composite decking. I just got back from a trip to Boston, looking around for that. I didn't see any composite decking anywhere. Some of that stuff is okay and pretty nice looking, but other it has this very fake wood grain on it that repeats every couple of 3 feet. And I certainly wouldn't want to have that version of it, and we have to look at that for 30 years. So if we can get it, it'd be nice to have something that just has the striations, or something that'd be prettier and doesn't necessarily cost more. So that's something I'd recommend that you take a look at. Thanks so much for that time. So not going to be in my 5 minutes, which would be a couple things. The Freight House, I think it's a mixed blessing that Nostalgia Farms has left, because it frees up space. But I'd like to see maybe that the Freight House Farmer Market not have that space more than temporarily, because I think we need to have an overall, maybe there is one, there needs to be an overall master plan for the Freight House. And I sure would like to see that the Freight House Farmers Market gets its own building of a certain size, perhaps just west of the current freight house in what's now a parking lot. I think that would be a perfect place. We could get by with some kind of a inexpensive building, maybe metal that's not competing with the freight house. And then that whole length of the current freight house could be restaurants providing life to the freight house. Right now, it's not doing us any favors except for the 2 days that it's open. It's kind of a dead zone at the west end of the freight house, and it could be something full of people in life. The last one I'd talk about is the issue about the Union Station and that. I looking at it the first time I've seen it this evening, but it's a matter of tunnel vision. You know, you send to the designer, say, what can you do about that area? And it's good enough as far as that's concerned, but I see River Drive is fully out of commission. And just like we've had this year, that's unacceptable. One of our 4 east-west streets in downtown Davenport, a quarter of our downtown is out of commission, and it looks bad. I don't think, in 10 years from now, I don't think it's going to look very good for people to say, look, at Davenport's flooded 3 times now. And I'm tired of seeing this on USA Today and on CNN. I think we need to draw a line from the from the Arsenal Bridge to the Crescent Bridge, and that's at the railroad tracks. Take advantage of the fact we've got 21'5", draw a line there on the river side, have either removable that's our bike path, have removable panels and or HESCOs as needed, and we're good to go up to 26 feet. River Drive is accessible. We don't look like, what can I say, fools to the rest of the country. So I'd like to have that being something to think about, essentially creating a levee on the riverside of that. And Bill Ashton, I think the same thing. I think there hasn't been enough consequences of this. When that HESCO failed, I went on YouTube, looked at HESCO, YouTube. There's a YouTube video. If you want to go higher than one HESCO, you can put another HESCO on top. You don't put sandbags on top of a HESCO. And nobody apparently at the city actually bothered to look at the manufacturer's instructions. So I think consequences need to be taken there. Thanks so much.